Number 10. This happened to my aunt when I was a kid, and it had major repercussions on how my mum and I dealt with my own safety when I became a teenager and started going out alone. We are from a small peaceful town in northern Spain, the kind of town where you wouldn't think this happens. My aunt was in her early 20s at the time and went to visit my mum. In my hometown, most people don't live in houses, but in apartment buildings. She rang the bell and her mum buzzed her in. Everything was business as usual. She waited for the elevator and got in. And right when she did that, before she could even press a button, a man, who had been hiding in the staircase, suddenly rushed in with her. This all happened very quickly. As soon as the man rushed in, she was cornered by him. He pointed at her with a knife and told her not to scream. And surely, she obliged. She managed to stay calm and just told him, "My mum is waiting for me. She buzzed me in, she knows I'm coming, and if I take too long, she will know something is up." The man didn't believe her, until, thankfully, her mum realised something was up because she was taking longer than what was normal. So she opened her flat's door and started calling her name. That's when the man freaked out and rushed out of the elevator, left the building, and my aunt made it home safely. Knowing this story, my mum always made me call her when I was walking home after a night out, even when it was 4 o'clock in the morning. So she would know that if I took longer than 15 minutes after the call, something was definitely up. And even though I have a copy of keys, I always ring the bell and she buzzes me in when I come home, even if it's late. She'd rather stumble out of bed at 4 in the morning than have that happen to me. Number 9. I am the kind of person who scares easily, so I am always cautious, suspicious and paranoid. To be honest, I live in a small port town where nothing out of the ordinary happens. I was about 17 at the time, and I used to take a bus to school. Well, actually, I'd take 2 buses, as the school was in another town. There used to be a lot of older college girls on the bus, but it was us schoolgirls that were usually the victims of groping and other creepy things that some freaks were into. I always held my umbrella tight in my hand, ready to lash out at any creeps that tried getting fresh with me. It just so happened that one day, I was sitting next to the window on the bus back home, just looking out at the scenery we passed. Someone sat next to me as I continued looking out. I turned to see a man, really short and dark-skinned, looking right into my eyes. Panic surged through me as my grip tightened on my umbrella. I looked away and pretended like I was just fine. He was very dirty and kind of unstable looking. He took out his phone and played some kind of song. I don't really know what language it was, and the music in it was just some creepy piano playing. I had never heard that song before. He smiled and bobbed his head to the music, which was kind of weird, because it wasn't really the kind of music that you bob your head to. My heart was racing. He occasionally looked at me and smiled. I was feeling numb and feverish. Throughout the whole journey, the song kept playing, and I was too scared to tell him it's disturbing, but I don't know why no one else did either. No sooner did the bus reach the stop where I get off, that I rushed out of my seat. For a brief moment, I thought I felt his hand on my behind, but that moment passed and I tore off the bus. I started walking to the bus stop from where I took the second bus home, and I felt someone following me. "Excuse me, can I talk to you?" I heard his voice from behind me. I kept walking. I slipped over once and scraped my knee, but I got up and just kept walking. He continued following me while repeating, "Excuse me." The second bus I take pulled up at the bus stop and I ran to it. I got in and sat on the very last seat. I looked out of the glass and there he was, staring at me. I didn't see him after that, and kind of forgot about the incident, until this thing happened. I moved to a hostel when I was in college. This is 3 years after the first incident. Now, my way home was further away, and when I had to visit home every other weekend, I had to change 3 buses to get there. One such weekend, I was on my way home. On the first bus, I was seated next to the window. A man boarded the bus and sat next to me, even though the bus was near well empty. He sat for about a minute, then got up and moved to a seat in front. I didn't really notice him. After a 20-minute ride, I got off the bus and went to board the second one. Once again, the same man got on and sat next to me. He asked me where the bus was going, which is stupid, because when we purchase the ticket, we are told which bus to take. So I didn't reply. He got up and got off of the bus, and relief washed over me. A few seconds after the driver started the engine, he rushed back on and sat in the seat behind me. I was now convinced that I was being followed. The 40-minute ride seemed like hours, and I was really afraid. I tried to calm myself through the ride. Maybe I'm just overthinking. Maybe it's just a coincidence. I simmered down and spent the remainder of the journey playing games on my phone. It was around 7 when I reached my hometown, and I still had another short bus ride left until I got home. I got there just in time to catch the last bus home for the day. Being in my area, a lot of familiar faces were on the bus, and I felt so much better now. But, of course, he also got on. This time I sat next to an old lady that my mum often spoke to at church. He sat in the seat adjacent to us. Throughout the whole journey, he just stared at me, only looking away if I turned towards him. I felt a deja vu moment, though I really couldn't place it. My bus stop arrived and I rushed off of the bus. It was dark now, and there were only a few street lights on. I felt footsteps behind me, and a beeping sound like someone dialing a number. Then I heard music. The hair on my arm stood as a chill ran down my spine. I recognized the tune. The same era piano music. The same unknown language. Then the footsteps picked up pace. I ran. I just ran until I saw the familiar building. the church. There were a few people gathered outside, probably some prayer meet. I ran up the steps and tried to blend in among them. When I turned around, he was gone. He just disappeared. I didn't know what to make of this. I considered telling one of the men there to just look around, but since he wasn't anywhere to be seen, I dismissed the thought. I waited there until the people left and walked home with them. It's been 6 years now since the second incident, and I haven't come across him again. I really don't know if it was the same guy both the times, but that music, it was just too much to be a coincidence. Number 8. Hi, I've been a lurker on this sub for a couple of weeks already, and I finally decided to share my creepy story that happened to me about a year ago. Also, English isn't my main language, so forgive me if I make a lot of mistakes. So, a little background story first. I'm an athletic 19-year-old female. I was 18 when it happened. I live in a really small town, with maybe less than 10,000 residents, and there are no streetlights where I live. Basically, everyone has an outside light on their front yards, and at night time, they have to turn it on to provide lights for the street. And believe me, it doesn't light up that much. Anyways, it was around May of last year when it happened, and since I have a very hard time falling asleep, I used to go on nighttime jogs all between the hours of 1 to 3 AM because it helped me fall asleep. My boyfriend and dad were always really concerned about that because it didn't sound safe for me to be jogging around the neighbourhood super late at night. But like I said, I live in a really small town and I always thought nothing bad could happen to me. Until that night. So it was a normal night, kind of cold since I remember having my raincoat on. I tied my shoes and went on my almost daily nighttime jogging routine. I'd say probably around 1 or 2 AM. I ran the same distance and took the same path, but for some reason, I ran faster than usual and had to take a short walking break to catch my breath. I stopped in front of a park, a couple of streets away from my house, and started walking back towards my house. But that's when I noticed him. He was standing in the middle of the park, with a dog that looked like a husky, or something as big as that. Like I said before, there are no street lights, and no lights in the park either. Plus, the street I was on only had 2 houses, so they were not providing that much light. So I really couldn't tell if he was looking at me, or even facing me at all. Obviously, it kind of shocked me to see someone wandering in a park so late at night, and was not used to seeing people in the streets around those hours. But I just shook it off and kept walking back towards my house. But after a few steps ahead, I started to feel uneasy and weirded out. So I looked over my shoulder and I saw him walking behind me, still holding his dog on the leash. He was approximately 2 meters behind me. My heartbeat was already pretty high from running, but I felt like it got even higher. I didn't feel safe at all, and even though I tried to keep calm, I just couldn't. So I started running as fast as I could without looking behind me. But To my horror, he started running too, and I could hear his footsteps behind me. After what felt like ages of sprinting through different streets, I couldn't take it anymore, as I was already exhausted from my jogging. So I turned into a driveway after taking a sharp turn into another street, and just hid. I crouched behind the bushes on a front yard. Not even 5 seconds later, I heard him take the turn and run past where I was hiding. Thank God. He then stopped running a few meters in front of where I was and started looking everywhere. I first thought that he could hear me and my heartbeat because it was beating so fast that I thought he could hear it. He looked left, right, as if he was looking for someone. And then he finally turned around, and I got to see him a little bit better. I definitely cannot tell how old he was, but considering he kept up with my running, he was probably less than 40, or just in really good shape. He was wearing all black, hoodie, pants, a cap. His dog looked like a husky mixed with something else. He then turned back and started running again. I stayed behind the bush until I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. God, I even stayed there for a good 10 minutes or so after that. I was so afraid that I didn't want to come out, but I had to because I knew I was still very vulnerable, and he could come back at any time. I then took all the courage and energy I had left, came out of where I was hiding, and started sprinting back to the opposite direction he went in to head back home, where I made it safely and promised myself never run late at night again. Never again. So, creepy park guy, let's never meet again. Number 7. This story happened when I was about 16. I've been a lurker here for quite some time, and this is my first post. Also, English isn't my first language, so sorry if I mess up with the grammar. When I was 16, I was very involved with dance, and I took classes at my local studio at around 6ish. The classes lasted around 2 hours, and was located at an area known to be populated by gangs. I got out of class about 2.5 hours later that night. The studio started to close up, and I was waiting outside on a bench. I texted my dad to come pick me up, and stared ahead for a while, waiting for almost 20 minutes. By then, everyone on the road was gone. It was then that I noticed someone directly across the street from me. It was hard to see his face, but he seemed about 20 something. Now, I was kind of set off, because no one except people from the dance studio would be out at this time. Although I was kind of weirded out by this guy, I just brushed it off and continued to stare at the ground, while looking at him from the corner of my eyes. If he walked right by, I wouldn't have been scared at this point. But he was just standing there. Standing and staring directly at me. I looked up at him, and it was at that point that he decided to come walking across the street towards me. My heart started beating really fast, and I stood up next to the bench and started fast walking away. He smiled and started sprinting towards me, all while screaming, "Come back here, girl! Come back here right fucking now!" I was crying and running as fast as I could, while he slowly started gaining on me. He was still screaming while I suddenly saw my dad's car pull up from where I was. He quickly got out of the car and yelled at the guy, "Get the fuck away from my daughter!" and brought out the baseball bat that was in our car. The guy backed away slowly and then ran off. I am so glad my dad was there at the right moment, or else I don't know what could have happened. So, creepy guy that tried to chase me, let's not meet again. Number 6. I've just stumbled upon this subreddit and thought some of you may be interested in something that happened to me whilst I was in primary school. I was in year 4, which would have made me about 8 or 9. I live in a fairly quiet town in the UK. I only live maybe 2 or 3 streets away from my school, so from a fairly young age, my mum always trusted me to walk to school, either with friends or alone. A few of these times people would smile and say hello, or ask if I was okay. I'd explain that I was on my way to school. Everyone knew how close the school was, so I just carried on my travels. I was usually fairly late, so I was the only kid about. I've drawn a little diagram of the street leading to my school. My artistic abilities aren't great, but I think I struggle to fully describe my surroundings. The dark green splodges are quite thick trees that line the side of the road. The ground around the trees and fences was maybe a metre or so lower than the road, so there was a little sliding bank going down. The school was fairly odd, and the fence that once contained the trees had seen better days. Most of it either had fallen down or rusted apart. All the kids were under strict instructions not to go down the bank. But hey, we were kids. The lighter green area was just grass that was under the strict instructions to never play on, unless we were with a teacher. I've also added a little orange line to give some reference to how long the road is. That's about a car's length. So anyway, I'm walking to school one day, and I notice a guy sat down in the grass on the bank. That is the purple circle as well. I keep to the other side of the road and go on with my day in school. Over the next week, he's there every day, sat with his legs going up the bank, so facing the road in a very strange position, and he's just looking around. I keep my distance, and it's starting to freak me out. But I was young, and by the time I reached the school, I was entirely distracted and just forgot all about it. This happened nearly every day for a week. Yeah, I was late every day. I was always a lazy kid, and my mum worked on the mornings, so I usually missed registration. I'm sure once or twice he yelled for me, but as I was walking on the other side of the road, I paid no attention and just carried on. It was the Friday of that week, and I sat out to school as normal. This time, I was pretty much on time. I noticed the guy isn't there, and I paused for a second. I couldn't tell you whether or not that frightened me or not, because in all honesty, I can't remember. I carried on walking, not giving it too much thought. I probably stopped to pick some grass off the bank as usual, and pick at it as I'm walking. Not in any kind of rush, I was just enjoying the stroll. It's then that I notice that it's really quiet. Like I said, I'm fairly on time, and usually there's upwards of 200 children lining up to go inside. It was usually very noisy with kids laughing and playing, but yet, as I'm walking, I couldn't hear anything but birds and my own breath. I got to the end of the street and turned to go through the gate, which is the blue line. And as I look, I was so embarrassed. There's no one in the playground, and the shutters are closed. It must be an inset day. Teachers are still in on inset days, so I figure I'll go inside and ask one of my teachers to call my mum to ask her to come get me. And if none of the doors are open, I'll just walk back home. I opened the gate, and like usual, it made the loud crashing noise of metal on metal as it shut behind me. It was then I saw the reception doors fly open and the teacher runs towards me. At first, just a sudden movement shocked me, and I was a little bit scared. I didn't really have time to process anything before she literally snatched me up and ran me back into the building. Safe to say, I'm in complete shock, and I've got no idea what's going on. She asks me where I've been, and if I'm okay. I can see teachers standing around with panic on their faces, and in all honesty, I thought I was in trouble. Turns out, one of my very best friends, Molly, had been walking to school that morning when a man, who was sat on the bank, asked her to come and look at something on the ground next to him. She was walking alone, so she told him no, and that she had to get to school. He stood up and walked over to her, showing her a flower that was in the palm of his hands. I'm not sure what he said to her, because I've never asked for specific details, but it was something that put her at ease. He asked her name, and she told him it was Molly. After that, she said goodbye, and knowing Moll, probably with a great big smile, carried on walking along the road, and apparently, he went back to the trees. She reached the gate. It was relatively early, because she went to breakfast club, so the playground was empty, and she's just started walking towards the school, which is the blue circle. She heard someone yelling her name, so she walked back towards the trees to see what was happening. That was when this guy hurls himself at her, restrained her, and tries dragging her down into the bank. I don't know the exact details, but I know there was a struggle. More than luckily, she did what she's always been taught and kept shrieking as loud as she could. This alerted a teacher who ran out of the school building towards the noise. As soon as this guy saw the doors opening, he pushed Molly to the ground and took off into the bank. The school was put into complete shutdown. Police were called, the kids already in breakfast club were kept in the building, and people's parents were called to tell them not to bring their kids into school. Except for all Wanderer over here. Like I said, my mum worked and wasn't contactable. Anyway, I stayed in there with Molly and the police officers until my mum came to pick us up. Then I remember staying at Molly's house for nearly a week, because all she did was cry. Truly heartbreaking stuff to remember. So, there's my close encounter. Yeah. Awful man who tried to steal my best friend. Let's never, ever meet. Number 5. It was the second day into a 4-day stay after having my son. So after 24 hours of labour, I finally had him. My now ex-husband and I decided to go downstairs and sit outside one of the hospital's benches just to get some air. We got my son to sleep, made sure he was secure in the nursery with attending nurses, and head off around 11:30 at night. Sitting outside while my ex smoked a cigarette, a woman approaches us. Her husband was in the car, and I noticed one child in the car seat in the back sleeping. We were right by the entrance to the ER, so I didn't think anything of it. Maybe she knew someone in the ER and was just coming out to keep her husband up to speed. This hospital has different coloured bands for the maternity ward, corresponding with the band your child has on, as well as some kind of let's not switch babies precaution. The woman approaches us and notices my band, and asks if I just had a baby. I told her I had. She asked if it was a boy or a girl, to which I responded. And then she starts getting into a story of multiple miscarriages and infertility. This is when I started to notice that she's looking like she's tweaky. By that I mean jittery, wide-eyed, looking around, picking at her skin. And her husband had the dome light on in the car, staring at us the whole time. She then starts asking me if he sleeps with me, or in the nursery, and how I delivered him, and how old he was. Avoiding her questions, and getting seriously freaked out, I look in the car again, and notice an empty infant car seat next to her other child. I immediately shut down the conversation, tell my ex-husband I'm starting to feel pain again. It was a C-section, so it was believable. And I hightail my sore ass out of there. I get back up the stairs to the maternity ward and alert the charge nurse. She immediately locks down the ward for the night and calls the cops. We came to find out there had been a missing child case in one of the neighbouring counties that matched the child's description of the one in the car, and a few hospitals in the area had been getting calls about them over the course of the last week. I talked to the cops, gave them descriptions of everyone in the car seats, which stood out because they were really cute, and the cops thanked me profusely. Hopefully, I cannot meet you again, kidnapping crazy woman, because you're in prison. Number 4. I'm a long-time lurker on this sub, and have finally got round to making an account to share this story. It's my first time sharing anything, so hopefully there are minimal mistakes. I'm a male, and was around 17 at the time. This story takes place on a winter's night, in a small town in southern England. I was over at a friend's house for a few drinks, as we were too young to hit the pubs, and the weather was too cold to drink in the actual woods anyway. My friend lived around 2 miles from where I lived, and around halfway home, there was a shortcut through the woods, where we regularly hang out, which would shave off a precious few minutes on my walk home. We were having a good time and enjoying a few cans of cider. I think it's the rite of passage for English youth. And at around 11 PM, I decided to head on home as I had work the next morning. I headed out of my friend's house and through the alleyway to the main road. It was here that I noticed someone on the other side of the road about half a mile back. I thought nothing of it. It's a quiet town, and I had made this walk plenty of times before without any issue. As I started walking, I felt an odd sensation, and the hairs on the back of my neck started to stand on end. I turned around to see the person had crossed the road and was now walking on the same side of the road as me. still a way behind, but I could see it was a large man with a hooded top on. Being a relatively switched on person, I decided to cross the road to see if he was copying me. No sooner had I done that, sure enough, the man followed suit. At this point, I started to nope out and walk faster. I kept checking behind me, and he too was walking faster, and there was a glint of something in his hand. Now, it could well have been anything, but my brain was telling me that this guy had a knife. I continued walking until around 100 meters away from the shortcut. Now, I had a decision to make. Do I take the shortcut through the woods, or do I continue another half mile towards the main road, where there was likely cars? As I mentioned earlier, I spent a lot of time in those woods, and felt that I would at least have the chance to lose the guy in there. Looking back, and the guy was around 200 meters behind me now, and gaining faster. My fight or flight kicked in, and I started sprinting towards the gate and the shortcut. Now, the shortcut was a small unlit dirt road, wide enough for a car to fit down, with back gardens on one side, long grass on the other, and tree roots littering the path. As I rounded the gate and onto the path, I checked back, and the man was fully sprinting behind me. I got about 10 meters down the path and tripped on one of the roots, falling flat on my face. It was because of part darkness and part alcohol. I would say that's to blame. Knowing I had seconds to make a decision on what to do before he got to the gate, I didn't think I could get up and go quick enough. Plus my knee was shot after falling down. I did the first thing that came to my mind, and rolled off the path and into tall grass, and I just lay there, trying to be as silent and as still as possible. A moment later, I heard the gate rattle and someone walk up the path behind me. Unable to see, as I was laying on my front facing forward, I prayed that he didn't spot me. The man lingered for a moment around 4 feet from where I was laying, catching his breath. He was breathing really heavy, and I could tell he was straining his eyes to try and see down the path in the dark. After what felt like eternity, he started walking off down the path, and I watched him go as far as I could see in the dark. My heart was beating fast, and the adrenaline was pumping through my body. I had sobered up very fast, and was now acutely aware of every single noise in the woods. I waited around 10 minutes after I last saw him, before slowly getting to my feet. I very slowly made my way towards the road, listening carefully for any noises that were out of place in the woods, and keeping a low profile, moving back towards the gate. As I reached the gate, I heard a loud bang behind me. I spun around and saw a black cat had just jumped onto one of the fences. No sign of the man. I made my way onto the road and managed to get home without any further incidents. Needless to say, I was incredibly wary whenever we returned to the woods for a drink. So, potential knife-wielding murderer? Let's not meet. Number 2. It all started about a year or two ago. My friend and I were going to walk to my other friend's house. On the way there was a guy walking behind us. We noticed that this guy looks like a bum, and I could have sworn I've seen him before. We just ignored it. However, we reached the bad side of town. Yet this guy was still behind us. However, when we got to my friend's house, this guy was just outside. I knew he was a bum, so I just thought he was setting up camp. Now, let me remind you, this is the bad side of town, so this is kind of normal. I never thought much of this. However, my friends lived across the street from another. When it got dark out, my friend went home. That left me in the bad side of town without a ride. However, with it becoming a boom town, there are people everywhere. Well, I'm stupid. The guy is still following me. Now I came across a path that A, goes into the woods, or B, goes onto a normal street. Now obviously, I was stupid and went with path A. I know that you guys are probably yelling at me right now. I started walking, and about halfway, I started to feel a little bit better, saying that it was probably all in my head. Well, I thought this guy was now gone, but I thought wrong. He jumped at me, but luckily he missed, and I started running. And I realised that this guy is a hobo. Now, I know that I've seen this guy before. I got to my house in time, and he didn't see me enter. If I was any slower, I don't know what would have happened to me. The next day, I see the newspaper. Well, what was left of it. It was dated from a week ago. I knew that I'd seen that guy before. Here he is, a mugshot. Down below it said, wanted for rape and murder. So, to this day, I never go down the bad side of town again. Creepy hobo stalker. Let's never meet again. Number 1. My dad had a friend called Ron, who would come to my parents' home each Sunday for a roast dinner, and would always bring some form of toy with him for me. Naturally, I always looked forward to seeing Ron, and seeing what Barbie or Sky Dancer I was going to get this week. I later found out he was going through a divorce, and would come over to get out of the house and tell his life story to my mum and dad over numerous bottles of wine. Just a note, my dad is a high-ranking police officer, and he regularly takes out our Alsatian Sophie to work with him. I must have been around 7 or 8 at the time, and my older brother Corey was 18 or 19 when this happened. It was the summer holidays, and I was off of school. I remember I was playing in the blown-up paddling pool in the garden with Sophie. The water was only up to my ankles, and I was splashing her while she was trying to catch the water in her mouth, and I thought this was hilarious. There was a small convenience store at the end of the road, and Corey was either on the way there, or on the way back. I just remember him saying that he was going to the shop, and would get me a princess magazine while he was there. My mum and dad must have been at work. I'm not sure how long I was playing there, but the next thing I see is Ron unlocking the back gate and coming into the garden. He asked where my parents were, and I simply shrugged and carried on playing. He was standing by the back door just looking down at me. He started to comment on how nice my bathing suit was, and that my parents had sent him over to take me to the park, and I have to hurry up because it's getting dark outside. I suddenly became very excited. I ran into the house quickly to get changed, and Sophie was right behind me. I was in the process of putting some knickers on when the phone rang. Running into my parents' bedroom, I jumped onto the bed and answered it. On the other end was my mum. She said a terrible feeling had come over her, and she just had the urge to call and check in on us. Corey is at the shop. Me and Sophie are getting ready to go to the park, and Ron is outside. He hasn't bought me a present this time though, but promises to bring me one next time. I gleefully giggled. It went all quiet on the phone, and after a few seconds, I could just hear my mum asking me to repeat myself. I explained that Ron had come over, and I was getting ready to go to the park with Sophie, and that I would be back before tea time. The phone went dead. I straight away thought that I was in some kind of trouble. It sounds silly, but I thought that maybe I was taking too long. Maybe I should be into the park already. Jumping up, I saw that Ron had climbed the stairs, and was now standing on the landing, just plainly staring straight at me. All I had on was some pink knickers. "I'm nearly ready," I shouted at him when I rushed to get ready. He took a step towards me, and Sophie lunged straight at him. I remember hearing them both go down the stairs. I could hear her growling, and a massive commotion downstairs. I thought to myself, oh boy, I'm in trouble now, and ran down the stairs after them. Sophie had Ron's arms in her mouth, and was sitting straight on top of him. She was still somehow growling, and looking him straight in the eyes. That's when my dad and two of his friends came barging in through the door. He simply had to say one word to Sophie, and she let go of Ron's arm. It was torn to shreds. I seriously think that I saw the bone. My dad took Ron away, and nothing else was said. My dad did end up taking me and Sophie to the park that day. Many years later, Ron was brought up in a conversation. Apparently, he had to have surgery on his arm where Sophie had latched on. In his car, they found an old bulky video camera, some rope, tape, and a large household kitchen knife. I asked if he's in prison now, and my dad just looked me straight in the eyes and said, he didn't make it there. Well, anyway guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any scary stories of your own which you would like to have shared, then please make sure to contact me, link in the description, and you may be featured in a future video. Also, I'm going to try and get these videos up maybe twice a week from now on, but we'll just have to see what happens. Anyway, I hope to see you soon, and I'll speak to you later.